Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Locknight coming at you. Another historic day yesterday in the marketplace, stock market there. Did you guys see that we actually had negative interest rates, and we still do, I think, for the 3 month and the 5 month T-bills. Unbelievable. So that means that instead of like you give them $100, instead of getting 103 cents back, you will give Uncle Sam $100, and he will give you $99.97 back. Negative interest rates. I thought I would never see that. I've seen everything in the market during this last crash. It's amazing. All right. And one of the craziest things, like we talked about last time, was oil. How the oil marketplace, we saw the pricing of that and how it just has been up and down for the last 15 years. It was nice and flat for a long, long time. And then, bang, it just started taking off. And that's because it's harder and harder to get that oil out. Okay. And one of our primary places we get oil imported. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to get that Saudi Arabian oil and all that." Well, very little of our oil, less than 10% of our oil actually comes from Saudi Arabia. Most of our oil comes from Canada and from Venezuela and from Mexico, because guess what? They're close, right? And that oil that we get actually comes from the tar sands, what we call the tar sands. And most people aren't aware of the tar sands or what it is really all about. So let's watch this little video, and we'll show you how we get the tar sands out. All right, it has some fracking stuff like that, but it's also an open pit mining too. All right, and most of this is done in Canada. And this is what you drive your car on, believe it or not.
Of sand, clay, and water that contains naturally occurring extra heavy crude oil known as bitumen.
And it's not crude oil, it's a different substance.
Unless it is heated or mixed with lighter hydrocarbons.
And this is how they get that curve, not to hit peak oil. They add this stuff in.
Cannot be used on bitumen because it is too viscous to flow and sticks to the sand grains in which it was found. Therefore, other extraction techniques were developed to produce the oil, the most common methods being open pit mining and in situ, which is Latin for in place. Bitumen within 75 meters of the surface is open pit mined. First,
so when we talk about the energy inputted to energy return, we've got to calculate all this equipment, and then how much oil do we get out? How many barrels do we get out?
It is sent for further processing. Around 80% of the oil sands are found 75 meters below the surface, and to extract them, in situ or underground methods must be used. The majority of the in situ operations pump steam underground through horizontal wells with the purpose of liquefying the bitumen, which can then be pumped up to the surface, a method called steam-assisted gravity.
That technology is just amazing, but it's costly, right?
With conventional sources and requires a special process called upgrading to give it properties similar to conventional oil.
So when we do this through the Keystone Pipeline, we have to make it a lot so flow, and a lot of chemicals are in there.
Located in northern Alberta, Canada, and Venezuela.
That's where we get all our imported oil from, just about.
And like all oil, its key advantage is its energy density. It is a versatile transportation fuel and is used in the creation of petroleum-based products that we use every day, like plastics. Oil sands development poses environmental and social challenges. The crude derived from oil sands is more carbon-intensive than conventional crude. This is due to the greenhouse gas emissions associated with production techniques used in the oil sands.
And that's what the ecological economist does. They add in CO2 and environmental damage, not just the energy to get it out. And this is one of my biggest pet peeves.
The water cannot be naturally recycled back into the ecosystem, but many companies are exploring technologies to return the water and ponds to their natural states. Land disturbance and use is also a concern for the oil sands, particularly when it comes to mining, as deposits occur in ecological
biodiversity.
Finally, oil sands production costs
equals resilience, which equals sustainability.
That's oil sands.
That is the oil sands. All right, it's one of my pet peeves of the world. If you guys ever heard of the society, the organization 350.org. And they are big on stopping this oil sands. They always say it's game over. If we used all the carbon that's in the tar sands up in Canada, it will be game over for the climate. We would not. It would be we're beyond what we could even fathom, right? And we need to get off of oil, right? And the foreign oil really we want to get off of is Canadian oil, right? But this is always because of the we need to get that oil. That's how we survive. So it gets a little bit more expensive uh, to get it out. All right. And one thing is that coal has kind of been like the opposite. Right? It used to be really expensive to get the coal out because all we had was pickaxe and hammers. But today we got some heavy machinery that can move things around. And when you hear that coal jobs are being lost, I think that's just a bunch of hubbub because of it, renewable energy or war on coal. It's because technology has been able to make us be able to get the coal out a little bit easier. And one technique that we use is called mountaintop removal. And it always brings a little tear to my eye to see wild and wonderful West Virginia becoming a mountaintop removal land. So let's watch this little video about mountaintop removal.
For much of the 20th century, most coal in West Virginia was mined by men working deep underground. But by the 1970s, a new kind of mining was starting to transform West Virginia on a scale that can still be hard to comprehend unless you see it from the air. At first, coal-rich Mingo County looks like many other forested areas of the Appalachians. But when the fog clears, you'll soon discover that many of the mountains themselves are gone.
Just gone, just blow that mountain right up the top of it. Go for that coal. All that debris gets pushed into the streams and the small little waterways, totally changing the ecosystem. Who needs a pickaxe and shovel when they got that heavy machinery? Look at that stuff, man. That stuff's huge. It'd be fun to drive.
Now, it's a 12,000-acre dig site. It can take just a few men and a few monster machines to destroy an entire Appalachian mountain.
Putting the seven dwarves right out of work.
Geologists locate the seams of coal below. Then, the company drills holes, stuffs them with powerful explosive, and blows them up to loosen earth and rock. Next, excavators move in to rip the mountain apart, scoop by scoop. For every ton of coal produced in a mine like this one, the company has to remove 16 tons of earth. The best way to grasp the scale of this operation is to watch it from the air. It looks like a giant sandbox with enormous motorized toys.
Yes, it does.
All this activity has one singular purpose.
See, they're just dumping over the side.
Cover valuable seams of coal like this one, and then dig it out and ship it to market. Surface mining is much safer for West Virginia's miners since they don't have to work underground in potentially dangerous tunnels. But it comes with a huge environmental cost. 500 mountains have already disappeared,
Gone.
with the habitats for hundreds of species. And lives are impacted too. When a mining company carves off a mountaintop, it has to put that earth somewhere. And so, it dumps it into nearby valleys. 3,200 local streams have been destroyed. And entire communities have been forced to relocate when the mining companies buy up the land.
So you can see that we have, in our thirst for fossil fuel use, we have come up with a lot of different ways to get that stuff out. And for coal, it's kind of gotten a little bit cheaper. But for oil, it's gotten a little bit more expensive, right? But we need to definitely change our ways because that coal and that oil are what's really putting the carbon into the atmosphere.
This one critical resource supplies nearly half of America's electricity.
Yes, it does. And that's what it supplies for us, electricity. Alrighty, so we are reaching further and further for our fossil fuels, and we need to start coping with those impacts. All right. So we are extending our reach in some ways. So you just saw the video about the mountaintop removal and the tar sands. Um, we're doing secondary extraction from the existing wells, going back there and trying to get the old oil out there that's kind of dripped down to the bottom. Now we're doing hydraulic fracturing. We're doing some deep sea oil, offshore drilling in some deep waters, and doing some new unconventional fossil fuel resources. But all these have increased the energy return on energy invested, all right, ratio. And it's making things a lot more expensive and intensifying the pollution and worsening the climate change, because every time we use it, it's a little bit worse. All right, we just saw how we do that with getting our coal out with the mountaintop removal video there. This is just immense. So this is the only place. I mean, that was West Virginia, but we do this in other areas in the Rocky Mountains, plus other countries get their coal this way as well. All right, and we just push all that debris right into those valleys and take away all these mountains. Okay, another typical oil and gas well, as much as 2/3 of the deposits may remain in the ground after primary extraction. All right, so we can't get everything out of there. All right, so what we do is we come back for the secondary extraction. And we put even more chemicals and solvents and water and use more steam and more energy to be able to get that stuff out. All right. This is much more expensive process than the primary extraction, but we want to make sure we get every little last drop out of that. Right. And every time we try to get that little last drop, it becomes a little bit more expensive, and it should be increasing the price of oil. But here we see that the oil is down to $23 a barrel. Right. We also do with directional drilling. All right, so instead of having to go straight down, we actually go to the side. And you saw that in a couple of different videos, in the fracking video and also in the tar sands video. All right, so we have the technology to go sideways, all right, and bore vertically. And we've had this technology for a long, long time. Believe it or not, way back to the first Desert Storm, Iran versus Kuwait kind of thing, they said that Iran was vertically drilling underneath and getting the oil off of Kuwait, and that's one of the reasons why we went and kicked Iraq out of Kuwait. But that's neither here nor there. But that technology's been around for a long, long time, and so is hydraulic fracturing. It's been around since the 1940s. We've known about it for 70 years. It just has not been economically feasible for us to be able to get that oil and natural gas out of the ground. All right. But you can see that we have actually increased our output of the natural gas using this hydraulic fracturing, right? And that's because we want to get off of coal and use natural gas to boil water to make the steam to turn that turbine, have those magnets go around a couple wires and give us electricity. All right, instead of using coal. So you see coal has actually decreased while natural gas has increased. All right, but we still need to do the total throughput of which one is easier, because we can't just think about this has less CO2. The coal has more CO2 than the natural gas when we burn it. All right, what about the extraction? How much CO2 is being released while we're fracking these wells? Okay, or removing the mountaintop to get that coal out. All right. So fracking has become the major debate in the United States and abroad in many different countries out there. All right. And right here in our backyard, the Marcellus Shale deposit is, that big hubbub about this. Okay. New York once put a moratorium on fracking. All right, I don't know if they still have it or not. Pennsylvania will keep on going, baby. West Virginia taxes the heck out of it because they need the revenue for their state. All right, so there's all this stuff that's going on with this hydraulic fracturing right here in our backyard. But we still are also drilling offshore. right, for our oil and our natural gas. All right, roughly about 35% of all our oil and 10% of our natural gas comes from offshore sites in the Gulf of Mexico. All right, but we're also exploring some more deep water drilling technologies to be able to get out there farther off the shore of the Gulf of Mexico and of Florida and of California. But there's this old not in my backyard kind of it's called NIMBY attitude, and California doesn't want these oil rigs off their backyard, off the beach coast, and neither does Florida. Okay. And we've also seen the farther we go out and the deeper we try to go, or the further up into the Arctic area we go, the more dangerous it becomes and the more prone to accidents happen. All right, in the Deepwater Horizon that we saw that shrimp video about that, and we also saw the Jon Stewart video um, about that. Oh, and also I think he did it right for the climate change. So this was a big pivotal moment, and we still didn't get off of oil. All right. And who knows? I mean, we're still doing the economic impacts of this Deepwater Horizon because it really hurt the tourist industry for a long, long time. And I don't know if it's even really back up and going yet. Okay. So the mountain ice in the because of climate change, the melting ice in the Arctic is that there's a big race to see who's going to be the first person up there to be able to get that new oil rig to get that natural gas in the oil out of the Arctic area. Royal Dutch Shell was the first attempt to do it. All right, the drilling rig ran aground during a storm. It was funny too when they did this. The first one was going out, and the Greenpeace, which is an activist group that said, "Hey, we don't want this to happen." That rig was going from port out to sea, and they strung themselves from the bridge, from like these little hammocks, and just hung there. So if the ship went underneath the bridge, it would kill them. All right. And they eventually were removed, and the oil that shell went out, and it ended up getting in a storm and breaking up a little bit, and had to come back and get fixed. All right. Then they did it again. All right. And they didn't really find anything. And Greenpeace also did the same thing, hung in hammocks, but they still went back out. They didn't find anything, came back, and I think they, as of the last talk here, that the Royal Dutch Shell has decided to abandon their Arctic attempt to go out there and drill in the Arctic, which is good news. But they found that it was just not economically feasible for them because it was just too much of a hassle. All right. But oil sands too are and oil sands and oil shale and methane hydrates are abundant and theoretically can provide centuries of energy, especially the methane hydrates, right? And the energy return on investment for these sources are low, however, right? So it takes a lot of energy to get one unit of energy out, right? The oil sands specifically have become a major source of the debate due to their environmental impacts and also the energy intensive ways to do that. All right, because these pits, to get these oil sands, we have to get rid of a lot of forest, right? Dig these enormous pits, do something with all that soil and dirt and stuff like that and rock. All right, and then we have to clean all that stuff and do something with the water. All right. And Canada sells much of its oil ultimately to us. All right, so it's our oil, it's our consumption of gasoline that's really driving this. And they wanted to put in, see, we already have a pipeline right here from the tar sands. Okay, so we already have one pipeline. They wanted to put in another one, right, to increase the output of the tar sands. And this was one day the staining rock was going on. I don't know if you guys remember that, right? They were going to put it through some native Indian lands, and they said, "Hey, we can't do that. We're not allowed. This is our land. Get the heck out of here." Okay. And they lost, of course. Okay. But there actually ended up being a spill so far. Okay. It was a big protest. I think about 4 years ago this was happening. right? And one of the biggest things about the tar sands and the bitumen and the creogen that we're getting out from fracking is that it's a very volatile. It's a lot less stable than our normal oil, all right? Because we have to put in a lot more chemicals and stuff like that into it to make sure that it works okay, or flows right down, or can be moved and transported, right? And a lot of times, what's been happening is that these tankers on the railroads have been exploding because they're just moving that oil around, right? And it just ends up exploding, right? And another thing happens with the pipeline is that this is a heavier grade crude oil. So there was a pipe that went through Michigan that had this thing. I don't think it's on this map here. Maybe it was down here in Missouri or something, right? And it leaked into this little creek, right? And they said, just a small little leak. We'll have it all picked up in a month or so, 30 days. It'll be nothing big, okay? And lo and behold, they're still trying to clean it up today. Because what happened is this isn't like little oil that you see those oil spills that all that oil floats on top of the water, right? This stuff is heavier and actually sinks down into onto the ground, right? And they have to actually get in there and jig it up, agitate it so it floats up to the top maybe, and they try to grab it, and it's still we can't go out there and chase crayfish in that creek, all right? So the emissions posed by and health risks that are driving climate change right now is our biggest thing about oil getting off these fossil fuels. Okay, so burning fossil fuels alters the carbon cycle, as we talked about. I don't know how many times in this class, right? Remember the carbon cycle? So that we are putting more carbon into the atmosphere, put more balloons into there, okay, creating that carbon dioxide, and more latent heat is being trapped in those balloons. It's just the way it is, all right? And that is all coming from our emissions, right? We could see that coal is the highest emissions of the CO2, oil for our cars is second, and natural gas is third, right? Put them all together, you can see our billions of metric tons of carbon emission that we're adding to the atmosphere that normally isn't in there every single year, okay? And this is what we need to level up. We got to turn this J curve into an S curve, and then hopefully we're going to bring it back down on the end of that bell curve too. Okay. We also have what's called clean coal technologies, and this refers to an array of techniques and equipment that tries to reduce the carbon footprint. All right. And also cleans out all other contaminants. All right, so we also already talked about sulfur dioxide and how that was creating acid rain. We created a sulfur market for it, and all of a sudden, we're able to still have electricity and drive our cars and have all this good stuff. All right, and no one even worries about the acid rain due to burning coal, and that is a clean coal technology. All right. We can also do something with it called gasification, which is kind of you liquefy it and turn it into a natural gas kind of thing, and then burn it that way. All right. So there's a lot of different things that we're trying to do with the coal to keep the coal industry alive and pumping. All right. What another thing we actually do with that coal is we do what's called carbon capture and storage, or CCS. And this industry is not doing too good. It really has not been able to come to full fruition as we would like it to be. All right, we really wanted it to be good, and it just becoming too expensive for some of the places. All right, what we're trying to do is convert the carbon dioxide into liquid form and then sequester it down here into the ground. All right, so we take the CO2 right off the flue, all right, and try to pump it down into these rock formations into the ground. All right, the only places we can really do it and make some money is by the refinery, because we take this CO2, we pump it in here, and we kind of get that old stuff, all that old oil, off the ground, right? Secondary drilling, right? Because that we pressurize it, and then that forces the oil back up, and then we take it to the refinery. This is the only place we can really do it. Obama tried doing just a regular coal fired plant, part of his clean coal technology plan of during the Great Recession. All right, and we had to finish up. We had to, give it up because it was not. It was the cost overruns were just too much. All right, so the only place we really can do some good carbon capture is with recovering something else outside of it. Okay. And there's no way of knowing if the stored carbon also will remain underground indefinitely. All right, injections could contaminate the groundwater supplies, could trigger some earthquakes. All right, just ask the people out there in Oklahoma. All right, and the process is very energy intensive, and this decreases the energy rate of investment of coal. All right, so that brings down this number for us. So it's not as good as it used to be. So fossil fuel extraction often leads to a flush of high-paying jobs and economic activity. All right, and sometimes the job benefits seem to outweigh the potential environmental costs. But we need to do what's called a proper break-even and figure out whether or not the environmental costs do equal the cost of getting that energy out of there. Okay, and that's what I try to do as an ecological economist, is try to figure out that environmental cost as well as the cost of actually extracting that and adding that to the energy return on investment equation. All right, so let's stop right there, and I probably have one more to go on this one. All right, and we will see you next time. Okay, stay safe, everybody.